when the world champion and Olympic champion is 2 lanes over from you, who, by the way, set a world record about 20 minutes before in a completely different event. To me, this is one of those career-altering swims for an
100%,
athlete.
yeah.
Welcome back to the Ready Room. I'm your host, Brittany MacLean Campbell, fresh off the flight from California. And yet, I'm so happy to be here chatting more things swimming. Pan Packs are done and dusted. Most of the senior swimmers are now taking a little bit of a break for the summer. The Canadians had a really successful run in California, I would say. It was so fun to watch new names reach podiums for the first time. The 13-medal performance for Canada was highlighted by Summer McIntosh's gold medal. Also on top of the podium, Alexanne Lepage, which we'll get into because it was one of the highlights of the meet, and Blake Tierney. Now I say we because I do have a guest with me in person. Co-host Kai is back. Kylie, thanks for being here. How's your summer been so far?
It's been great. I've enjoyed some time in the city and, of course, cheered on Team Canada.
Okay, perfect. That's also one of the main reasons I wanted you to come in, because when you aren't swimming at a meet, often it is hard because you're a little disconnected, but at the same time, it's the first time you probably watched majority of the races, because when you're an athlete competing, you can only do things based on the schedule of your competition. So you're fresh as a fan, but then also I'm going to put your analyst cap on a little bit. So we're going to dive into 3 takeaways overall of the competition, some of the main themes, the main storylines. And without further ado, we'll dive into the first one, which is, I'm calling it the resurgence of Taylor Ruck.
I love that.
Now, I never want to say Taylor is back, because saying she's back implies that she went somewhere, which she didn't.
She never left.
She never left. She's been such a staple on the national team for over a decade. I remember it so fondly. The year right before the Rio Games, she had a really standout junior world championship. So that would have been 2015.
Wow.
And then all of a sudden, the next year, she's on the Olympic podium twice as a teenager. And then really, she's been on pretty much every national team since then. You've been along for that whole ride. What was it like to see Taylor set best times, knowing she, in some events, hasn't hit these bests in over 8 years?
Yeah, it was pretty cool. I'm super proud of Taylor. I think it's one thing to know that the work she's put in over the last decade, but also to like you said, be her teammate and have been there through some of those years where I know she wasn't reaching what she had hoped in those years. So it was really, really, really special to see her have such success in so many events too. And yeah, best times don't come around often. So when you have the opportunity to get one, it was pretty cool to watch.
One of my favorite parts about watching Taylor is that, yes, she's grown up so much, pretty much like we've literally all watched her grow up, but she's still, in a sense, just like the young first version of Taylor that I met. Like, every time she came through the mix zone and we would tell her her time, she's like, oh, really? Like, I went that? And we're like, yeah, you just set a Canadian record. And she'd be like, oh my goodness. And then she's like, it felt good. And I feel good in the water. And it's sometimes I think we need to be reminded that it's not as deep as analyzing every time and figuring out all the statistics. It's like she's having so much fun training right now in Vancouver, and she seemed to have found this stride. Someone similar to you that has kind of gone to different training environments and has now kind of settled down. Talk to me about what it is like once you are an athlete that has found you found your home, and now it seems like things are clicking.
Yeah, I think it's important to find that. I think there's a lot of things that might feel up in the air when you're not settled in a place. And so just feeling like you're at home and at peace in your training environment and outside of the pool as well is also really important. That can, be really critical to your success in the pool. I think for Tay too, something that's really admirable about her is her positive outlook on the sport. Like you said, I think she approaches every race as a new opportunity, and the sky's the limit. And I think over the years where she hasn't maybe reached those best times or seen the success she'd worked for or hoped for in those years, she still maintained a positive mindset, a positive attitude, and came back the next year to try and be better.
Yeah, and you talked a lot about her versatility, which is one of my favorite things. You can't count her out, whether it's a 50 fly or a 200 backstroke even, which she isn't doing the 200s anymore, but we tried to test her of what about the relay? Would that ever be a potential? And she said she'd think about it, so we'll keep in mind. But she did set 2 Canadian records here. One was in the 50 fly and one was in the 50 free, which she held that mark from the last time Pan Packs happened in 2018, which is so fun. And then she got on the podium 5 times. This also excites me a lot about the freestyle relays and medley relays, because there's been a bit of an adjustment since the last Olympics. People retire, one of them being Maggie, who is kind of that fly specialist on the relay for so long. And to see this as a backstroker and as a dynamic leader on that medley relay, does this excite you about that relay potential again?
100%. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure she's the first person that's been 56 other than Maggie, recently at least. So it is really exciting. And, you know, to have someone like Tay that's capable of doing 3 out of the 4 strokes on a relay like that, like knowing that we have prelims and, you know, people are in various different events across the 9 days, 8 days of competition, it's a really like comforting feeling, I think, to know that we can lean on Tay for 3 out of 4 of the strokes in the relay.
I know. I was just about to say, we have you as her backstroke ace still, but her backstroke looks phenomenal. Her butterfly is so strong. Like you said, like watching her right beside the Panpax is hard, right? Because some of the best in the world are there, and in other events, it's a little bit of a different, quote, diluted field, because maybe it's the best of in the 400 IM are all from Europe. Like that was a bad example, but in theory that could happen.
Yes.
So watching her in the events that she swam, like there were world records broken in the same heat, yet she's still on the podium. Watching her in the 100 fly, she was beside the gold and silver medalists from the Olympic Games, Tori Husk and Gretchen Walsh, and she like was at Gretchen's waist at one point. Like this is exciting, and to see her fly so on, I thought about that too. I'm like, she can do 3 of the 4 strokes easily in a medley relay, and to go in with that confidence of knowing we have that reliable relay performer. Like she is a performer. She a split of 52 on the last night after a ton of racing over 4 days, and I just feel really confident as a spectator and confident in her as a teammate of what she could potentially do in the years to come. And obviously it's not all about LA. I hope that the next couple of years she continues to find success in the little wins throughout, but I think it's just a really exciting place for her to be at, heading to what she's now deemed, she said out loud, her final Olympic Games. So yeah, that's really exciting. We're both proud of you, Tay, so congratulations. Big fans in Kylie and Britt. My number 2 takeaway, I'm calling it kind of, I love how I make these like statements as if I'm like, I have the name. I'm calling it new potential. Okay. So there were some athletes that had what we would consider surprise victories just because they weren't going in as one of the favorites of the meet. And that was Blake Tierney and Alexanne Lepage. And getting to watch them hit their big first international senior podiums and to do it with a gold medal. I don't care what meet it's at, to hear your national anthem played under the lights at a big final, like that is pretty remarkable. Watching them reach those podium performances, how did it feel for you?
Yeah, super exciting. I think watching Blake, I know he had a little bit of a taste of the international fields last summer at Worlds, but still seeing him again rise to the occasion of having to perform under the lights against some big names was great to see. And I mean, Alexanne, like that was incredible. Watching her, again, just taking advantage of the opportunity that she had. She had a lane, she focused on herself, focused on her own race strategy, and had put together an incredible race. Best time, I mean, champion, like super, super exciting for Canada. And I mean, super exciting for her. I know she went to Junior Worlds
3 years ago.
3 years ago, yeah. So, you know, to see her now 3 years later on top of the podium, like I hope she's just soaking it all in and really like taking confidence from this whole summer, the entire meet for her, and I know it'll do well for her in the next year, couple years.
Yeah, well, you talk about Junior Worlds, and I was definitely going to mention that as well, because that was 3 years ago. It was kind of like her big breakout performance. She won the 100 and 200 meter breaststroke, and then unfortunately did not qualify for Paris in 2024. And so for some people, that can be a really big deterrent in your career. You miss the Olympic team, but it seems like we're just starting to see the best of what she's capable of doing, which is so great. I ran over and hugged her coach, Mike Blondell, after to congratulate him. And he said, she's fearless, and like the biggest smile on his face. And I think that really stood out to me, because as a coach, you can set expectations for your athletes and you think you know what they can go. But we all watched her take out that first half of the race. And then everyone's like, okay, great. Like a really solid start. Like, and then at the 150, she's still winning. And I'm like, okay, like, and then all of a sudden, she makes this final surge. And I said, what a phenomenal, but also gutsy. Like, it's so hard to just go for it in a race like that when the world champion and Olympic champion is 2 lanes over from you, who, by the way, set a world record about 20 minutes before in a completely different event. For Alexanne to go head to head, you said drop a 1.5 seconds from her lifetime best. To me, this is one of those career altering swims for an athlete.
Yeah.
She has now put her name on the map. And that time, I just wanted to reference, because then the follow-up question is like, okay, well, where does that put her against the best in the world, the best in the Olympic field kind of thing? So the Olympic podium, to make the Olympic podium in 2024 was 2:21.05. So she was about 7/10 off that, but her time would have been a clear 4th place. And then the world's podium in 2025, it took a 2:23.52. So her time would have put her 3rd. So to know that, like, she set a time, not just a race, but a time that is now in contention to put in consideration for an Olympic medal, is so remarkable. Kylie, I wanted to ask you, because you definitely were an athlete that kind of like had this resurgence right before an Olympic year, but definitely weren't going in as an Olympic favorite. And then you got your way onto an Olympic podium. Like, for Alexanne, what would your advice be now, 2 years out? She is a teammate of yours. You've been a leader on this team. 2 years out from the Olympics. She's yet to get to go to an Olympics yet. And now she's all of a sudden, the expectation's higher. What would you say to her?
I would say to just continue to believe in yourself and really take confidence from this past, entire year. She had a wonderful year leading up to Pan Pacs as well. I know she swam super well at Mare Nostrum. So really just like gaining confidence from each experience she had this year and knowing that she belongs in that field, I think is a huge one. Like, that's something that I personally felt like in the beginning of my career. It's like you can easily get a little bit, I don't want to say scared, but like a little bit shy of being in that big final with these big names of people you've heard of and may have raced before, may not have. But knowing that she belongs there and she's capable of doing incredible things, I think is what I would tell her, and to just keep doing what she's been doing and to enjoy it.
It's so true. I always say to young kids, if they ask, like, there's the reason, if it were just about the best swimmer on paper, we would never swim the race, right? Like, you see the heat sheet and there's automatically somebody, whether you like it or not, you, as a kid growing up, you look through that heat sheet and you see lane 4 and you're automatically counting yourself as like, oh, it'd be nice to finish 2nd or 3rd in this heat. And it's like, why do we do that? Like, you are just as capable of beating the best in the world. And she just did it in a race that, it wasn't like she did it at a pro swim series, right? Like, this was the big taper meet of the summer. And so for her to do that under pressure was pretty remarkable. And yes, she was the underdog, but nowadays she can move forward knowing that she's just as capable as anyone else in the field.
100%.
To get her hand on those walls.
And you never know what could happen.
Right.
Like, I think that's the biggest thing as well. Like, illness and injuries and all those, horrible things that you wouldn't wish upon anybody aside, but still, like, people have poor races, like, things happen, and you just never count yourself out.
Right. No. And speaking of poor races, our third theme is kind of under that understanding of like, how do you process a competition when things just aren't going your way? So one of the biggest question marks of this meet was Summer's performance. Summer McIntosh, of course, we know her as a 4-time world record holder, or the world record holder currently in 4 different events. She's taken the Canadian swimming scene by storm for the last 4-5 even years. And she had a challenging competition, a week that didn't go her way, a week where every time we saw her through the mixed zone, it was having to challenge herself with like, I don't quite yet know what
overall
went wrong.
This meet didn't go the way I wanted it to, so there'll definitely be a lot of reflection and, focusing on how I can be better next season.
And I think that's such a frequent reminder as athletes that like things happen. Bad meets happen, not to say or make assumptions that she sees it as a bad meet per se, but just like we all go through it. And I think as an analyst, my brain immediately was trying to make sense of it because so many people ask me, it's like, what's happening with Summer? And Summer alone, her coach Bob, her competitors, like nobody can put a exact reason to it at this exact moment. And that's why I really was hoping to have a bit of a conversation with you about what it is like as an athlete when you dive in for that first race and things just aren't clicking. Day one, knowing you're now like okay, things aren't adding up, but I have a 4-day competition. Like, how do you approach that as a mindset?
It's tough. I think swimming is such an interesting sport that there really aren't answers sometimes to why things are happening. Like, there have been times when, I have felt amazing and have, then my expectations are higher to want to perform a certain way. And it's the complete opposite, and vice versa. Like, I could feel absolutely terrible and then have swum the fastest I've ever swam. And those sort of things like make it really hard to understand swimming, because you put in hours and days, and so many different elements go into a performance, not just the training, but weights and, nutrition and sleep. Like, there are so many different factors that come into play, especially on a race day. So, starting off the meet and, trying to change that mindset, I think it just comes that one step at a time, and, seeing how something goes and trying to have some time to reflect on it, but also know that, okay, it's in the past. I have to move forward. If you have another race coming up that day or the next day as well, just taking the time, I think, to recognize and like validate your emotions, but also, especially if you're in competition, trying to regulate those emotions to prepare yourself to do the best that you can the next day or the next race.
And I also want to credit Summer a lot here, because we say, the meet didn't go her way. She still left with 4 medals. She won the silver in the 200 freestyle and the 200 IM, and she won the 400 IM herself. But speaking to your previous point about anything can happen, she unfortunately didn't get through to the 400 free A final. She was the first. I really admired her response right away. She took ownership. She said it was a misjudgment on my part. I should have been in that final, and her time would have ended up placing 3rd. It was such a fast field, obviously, with Ledecky and Pallister challenging the sport in ways that none of us could ever fully explain. But nobody going in would have been like, the rest of the final probably thought I didn't have a shot in this, and now all of a sudden they do, because something you didn't expect happened. So you do have to be prepared in a way for a little bit of everything. I wanted to ask you from your experience about tapering, because a lot of questions come and people don't, if you're not in it, it's hard to describe the process of a taper. Summer's in a brand new training environment this year, which obviously is going well in certain ways. And some people would say, obviously, how do you know obviously? Well, her fitness is there. She came to trials in July and broke a world record on night number 1 of a 200 fly, a record that's stood since 2009. We know she's fit. We know she's in shape. We know she's working hard. That part we can, I guess, compartmentalize in a way. But a lot of people, when we say the term missing your taper, can you describe what that means?
I think, to put it,
because it's such a feeling, right?
Yeah. I think, it ultimately is a feeling, because, like, yes, it's kind of science, I guess, calculated over your year of training and, normally what your average is. But I would say taper generally is doing less training than what you've done the entire year. That's in the weight room, that's in the pool for most people. However, there are certainly exceptions, and as you specialize in sprint versus distance, those numbers are different as well, because in a normal training day, those numbers are very different. So yeah, it's a little bit of a science. I think it also has to do with each individual and how they feel, how they react to weights, if they really like doing some more power explosive stuff, if they prefer to completely back off weights. Like, there's just so many elements. It's kind of hard to explain, but
I know. Well, that was just to piggyback off what you said. I think that's also the difference of like her training partner, Reagan Smith, also struggled this week. And she said openly, like, obviously we've mistimed something a little bit. And they all had a lot of confidence in the training block they had put in all season. And then for them to come here, and it wasn't just Summer, some of her other teammates weren't quite clicking. And the way I would describe when you do hit your taper, like that feeling, it's almost like a zip for your stroke, and it like you ride the water differently. You're like every stroke feels a little bit more effortless than the one before it. And sometimes you find that if you missed your taper, you feel a bit more like if you hit it too early, in theory, you were maybe in training on like 3 days out, you were going times. You're like, hey, I feel really good. And then day 1 of the race came and you're already starting to feel fatigue, which means you literally just like you peaked and then you fell down. Or if you miss your taper on the other end of the spectrum, maybe it's like day 4 or 5 of a meet and you're just starting to feel your zip, which means in theory you hit it a little later than you were anticipating. But someone like you in your career that you've tapered now every summer and potentially other times a year, a couple, like, are you down to an exact day where you're like, I want to hit this amount of meters and I want to do this amount of fast swimming? And like, have you kind of really fine-tuned your taper personally?
Yes, for the most part, not to a specific day, I would say, but a couple day range where I know, okay, I'm gonna, usually about 2.5 weeks out, it's like, okay, I come off of weights, and then I slowly start to bring down the volume in the pool day by day. And then typically like a week before or 5 days before, it's like a big come down even more of volume in the pool.
Yeah, because you want to still feel that fitness. Like you want to still feel strong enough to get through a longer race. And, even your last event of the Paris Olympics was the 200 back. So you had to still have the speed of the 100 and do prelims, heats, prelims, semis, finals. But you also needed to be able to do a 200 backstroke in the same deliverable later and do the medley relay on the very last day.
Yes.
That's 8 days later.
Yes.
So you have to, in theory, be at peak for 8 days. So this is, as much as it's a science, it needs to be a little bit flexible as a science.
Adaptable.
Exactly. And as much as we've been talking about Summer for so long, she's still 19 years old, about to turn 20. So by no means is this a disaster. Some really key learnings here where her and her coach can take away everything that they just learned this week, peel back what the actual physical feeling was against the time comparisons, and work towards Worlds next summer. Like it really, I hate to say it's not that deep, but it just like, there isn't a rhyme or reason necessarily, right? Like it feels like the end of the world when you don't have a time that you've worked so, like you've all, as athletes, you train the whole year for usually one chance to showcase what you've worked for. And yet sometimes it just doesn't add up.
Unfortunately, yeah.
And you can't really do much about it.
No.
And you felt it. One more question on this theme before we move on. I wanted to ask you about being a world record holder, because rarely have I gotten to talk to world record holders, but you are literally in front of me as a world record holder. At some point in your career, you had to go into a meet as the world record holder. Did that feel different than going into the meet, entered second or third?
Yes, 100%. I think there's almost this weight of, pressure and partly pressure that I put on myself too, because it was something I wanted to achieve. But there was just so much more focus and attention to my race than what I was used to in the past. And again, that's a privilege, and I was very grateful to be in that position. However, I still felt the weight of that. And I remember at the end of the race, it was certainly like a little bit of a relief to have touched the wall and seen it. And it was almost like the relief took over than the actual like excitement of achieving the world record for me, because I think I was just a little bit shocked and overwhelmed with the previous pressure and then the race itself.
And it's such a skill, swimming and a lot of sport, but swimming particularly, because that's all I know. It's just like such a mental and physical combination of battle. Like in order to be the best in the world, you have to have that perfect balance of being able, because pressure is a privilege, like you said, but it also is often within yourself that you hold that pressure. Like at the end of the day, the people writing the articles or following the story, or the coaches or the competitors, like after that day, they'll move on to something else. But for yourself, like you'll always remember the day you won world championships after being a world record holder and going in with that much more pressure, and getting on the Olympic podium after trying to keep your streak alive or whatever it is, right? Like you remember that more heavily than anyone else.
100%.
So it's a privilege, but I always say you feel nervous because you care about something. So for you, the nerves and that excitement and like the ability to balance it all and perform is such a challenge. To get to the top once is one thing, to be able to stay at the top is a whole other thing. So I think this is also test of like how any athlete that were disappointed with the results from this meet, you take all these learnings away. Hopefully you take a couple weeks away from the pool. Like I hope Summer's in Muskoka at her cottage as we speak, just soaking up some sunshine, some good time with your friends. A happy swimmer is always a fast swimmer. And at the end of the day, it's sport. It can't consume you. You have to take those moments to just be a human. But she's 19 and she's going to learn from this and move forward. And we're all going to learn from this and move forward. And I can't wait to cover her and the rest of your team next year. But some really great, thanks for chatting that through with me. I feel like I constantly learn the more we talk about this, but it is a heavy weight to carry as a champion. And I think finding the balance of how you continue to carry it is something she's going to be navigating in the next couple of years. So LA in a weird way is far away, but in a weird way, it's also really close. So With that, before we let everyone go, we did want to talk a little bit about what's currently happening, which is the Junior Pan Packs. They're being hosted on Canadian soil, which is really exciting. So what the Americans got to experience in California at the Pan Packs, the Canadian team are experiencing right now in Vancouver for Junior Pan Packs. It is such an awesome opportunity to race as a young athlete. And we talk about LA being not too far away. The statistics would show that a couple athletes from this roster will be on the Olympic team in 2 years, which is pretty remarkable. I went back and did some research because I wanted to bring some accurate info to this episode. The 2022 Junior Pan Packs were 2 years out from Paris 2024. There were 6 out of the 36 athletes at that competition ended up making the Olympic team. 2 years later, Lauren Wigginton, Tristan Jankovic, Ella Jansen, Julie Brosseau, Reagan Rathwell, and Emma Finland. So 6 of them. But what I also thought was kind of cool, Maggie McNeil in 2018 was the Junior Pan Pacific champion, and 1 year later was the world champion. So it's like these development meets matter. Some of the biggest stars, I know I was also looking up today, like Gretchen Walsh got her start at Junior Pan Packs. Her sister Alex Walsh was there. Lanny Pallister, who just lit up the pool at Pan Packs. It all starts for a lot of people at Junior Pan Packs. So when you are kind of watching this meet as a veteran of the team, are you starting to think about like who could be your teammate in the next year or two?
Yeah, it's super exciting. I love just seeing the next generation come through and continuing to cheer them on.
Okay, so we have an opportunity here. Athletes are geared up to perform. Kylie, I wondered if we could each kind of say one athlete we're excited to watch, whether it's kind of like knowing that they have a big future on this Canadian team. It's also one of the questions I'm constantly asked because athletes like Summer or Penny or Taylor surged onto the scene at 14, 15, 16 years old. And so we're constantly thinking about like, who's next? Who's next? We can't just live in the present. Sometimes we're always just looking for who's next. So for you, who is that one athlete that you're really excited about that you're going to watch this week at Junior Pan Packs?
So I went back and did a little research, and I am going to shout out Shima. I think she has some incredible opportunities in the breaststroke and medley events. She did super well at trials, our Canadian trials. So yeah, excited to watch her this week and see how she does.
That's such a good one. Shima Tagabi has been constant. Like, I think it was when she was first like in the 11-12 category, breaking those national age group records. And she just turned 15 now. So I guess it was then when she was in the 13-14 category, she was breaking all these national age group records. Being on the mic at trials, it was one name that always stood out. So to see her actually be in the age range now where like her times are going to be really pushing some of the best in the world, I couldn't agree more. I'm really excited about her future. My pick here for one of the swimmers I'm most excited to watch race is going to be Oliver Blanchard on the men's side. So he won the 1500 at trials about a month and a half ago. And it was one of my highlights of the meet because he was going back and forth with Aiden Kirk, who had just won the 800. So Aiden going in was the favorite. And then it came down to the last 50. Oliver was like chasing. And on the last 50, he overtook Aiden by like a half a second to win the event, which would have actually made him eligible for Pan Packs on the senior side. But he opted to swim at Junior Pan Packs. I haven't got the chance to ask him actually himself, but I think that the reasoning for that was to be able to kind of experience the racing against some people in his more time range, age range. He can be kind of like a big fish in that pond. And looking forward to seeing what he's capable of doing. He dropped 20 seconds at the trials. Wow. So if there is another time drop in his realm, big things are possible. But we haven't had a really ace distance swimmer on the men's side since Ryan Cochran, who's been retired for a decade now. So it just excites me knowing that Oliver's only 17. So the future is bright. And I'm excited when you see a big performance like that, similar to how we described Alexanne's. It's like knowing somebody is willing to just get in there and give it their all and kind of just leave it all in the pool and take a risk. So what I see out of him excites me. So Shima and Oliver are two athletes we're watching, but really we're watching that whole team, which anyone at home, if you're wondering, all of the Junior Pan Packs are streamed on CBC Gem, so make sure you are tuning in. The meet runs from the 17th through to the 20th, so it's already gotten things started, but you can keep watching it through to August 20th. Kylie, I can't let you go without asking you a no-cap question. I don't have a physical cap, but when I was in California, I was I kind of was inspired by this question because you're a backstroker, so I have to ask, would you rather swim backstroke in an outdoor pool while it's like peak sunshine, or with a ceiling that has a roof that's all slanted and like directionally challenged?
I think inside still,
Okay.
even with a crazy roof.
Okay. So the swimming outside is probably the biggest challenge as a backstroker.
Yes, like some people are so good at it, but I also feel like sometimes it's just luck, whether you veer off or not. But yeah, I would say inside.
Do you have any races that come to mind where you've been in an outdoor pool and just like have not been able, because your Canadian record in the 50 is from an outdoor swim?
Yes.
So obviously you figured it out before.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Sometimes it's just like you just stay straight, and other times you just cannot stay straight. So I vividly remember in 2018 at Commies, it was outside in the Gold Coast, semifinal of the 50 backstroke, absolutely raining sideways, like completely like no visibility. And
You just had to do it.
yeah, there was no other option.
Yeah.
So
You
just figure it out.
There is a sense of like everyone's in the same boat,
Yes.
but it is like there are swimmers that are just so dynamic and like dynamite in the outdoor pool, and they know it, and maybe they train it. But
Yeah.
like you said, you could have everything going well, and then one day you just ram into the rope. Like
Yeah.
doesn't matter how experienced you are.
Exactly. And I think sometimes too, the body position and where your head is can play a big role, because if you naturally have your head a bit like looking at your toes, it would be easier for you to swim outside than it would be for somebody who might have their head back.
Yep. It's so interesting. Just when you think you have it figured out, like I learn more about this sport every day. So thank you for your insights. We've loved having you there. And thank you for being here in person. It's always so much fun to have you in person and get to see you. Without further ado, if you're not already watching, make sure you're tuning in to Junior Pan Pack streaming live on CBC Gem. The prelims are at noon Eastern every day, and the finals are at 8 p.m. Eastern, so a little bit earlier than what the Pan Packs were, so you don't have to stay up as late at night. No excuses. Watch the juniors and the future of this national team, and we'll see you next week. Thanks for being here, Kylie.
Thank you.